Do you find evangelization hard? Do you feel overwhelmed just at the prospect of being able to answer people's questions and objections? Or maybe you've gotten pretty good at answering people's objections, and yet nothing seems to really change. You don't seem to be able to move the needle forward. I really understand. I've been trying to do this for years. I even went and got a graduate degree in theology. And you know, it hasn't helped. Until I had this one very sad experience. One time as I was trying to answer someone's questions, I just had this sinking feeling which prompted me to ask the person a question. I said, if I was able to answer this question or any other question you had to your 100% satisfaction, do you think you would pursue your faith life? Go to church, start praying, opening yourself up to a relationship with Jesus? And the answer invariably was, well, no. Why would I do that? Faith and all these things isn't important to me. Chris, frankly, it's irrelevant to me. No disrespect. And I found that this started to be a common answer. And that's very sad. But while I was glad was because, okay, now I know what I need to address. And so perceived irrelevance in the majority of cases is the biggest barrier to evangelization. Therefore, you need to learn how to navigate from perceived irrelevance to relevance. But there's 3 things that you need to have before you can learn how to do that. First of all, you have to have a relationship with Jesus yourself. I guess that's kind of obvious. Number 2, a little bit of courage. And number 3, a lot of Holy Spirit. So, therefore, you don't need to have a theological degree. You don't need to have apologetics training. And you don't need to take an advanced evangelization training course. But you do need to know how to navigate this. And today I want to share with you my 3W formula for bridging from perceived irrelevance to relevance. Now, before we dive into that, it's still important for you to learn how to answer people's questions and answer objections. Number 1, there will be some people, the minority of cases, where if you're able to answer it, it really will remove a roadblock. But secondly, even if it doesn't, you need to have answers to respond to Peter's call of giving reasons for the hope that you have. And so to help with that, at the end of the video, I'm going to give you just a little hack, an answering objections, answering questions hack that is a little spicy, maybe controversial for some of you. I'm going to share it with you briefly at the end. But I want to dive in to my 3W formula for bridging from perceived irrelevance to relevance. Okay, so let's go through them. So in each one, what I want to do is give you a little bit of context. And as I do that, you may be able to guess what the W is. You are pretty smart folks. The first one I think you'll guess easy enough. The other 2, I think you'll have a bit of a challenge. But before I go through each one, I just want to describe the overall strategy, because there are probably more than 3 W's. But they're all going to fall under this one umbrella, and that's this. In the initial stages of evangelization, if you want to bridge from irrelevance to relevance, you have to engage people in what is relevant to them. You have to meet them where they're at. Okay, so let's go through them. One at a time. The first W is going to probably really surprise you. The first bridge to relevance actually is you. Because the people you're evangelizing are people that you have some relationship with, you have a relationship with them because you have something in common with them. Like maybe they're people from work, or people in your neighborhood, or people at the gym. And so you have something in common already. And when people have things in common, they share about other things in their life that you may also potentially have in common. So for years, I worked in tech companies. And a lot of people that were in technology liked to play video games. We actually even had like a really big setup in our office when we wanted to kind of let off a little bit of steam, especially during a stressful period. But there may be other things that you share with, these people that you're in a relationship with that, may or may not be typical. And this includes faith. There are people that you have things in common with. There are probably some people in your circle who actually might be open to faith, but maybe they don't know it and you don't know it either. Let me give you an example. So one of the coolest tech jobs I had was my first job. In a software development company. And I'd worked there for a couple of years, and then I got a new boss. They were able to recruit this awesome executive, and we were really impressed with him, and I think he was pretty impressed with us. And there were a few of us that were going to Mass at lunch hour, and he caught wind of this, and he was really impressed, surprised, intrigued. He didn't say too much, but you could tell he was visibly like, wow, that's pretty neat. And one of us, maybe me, I'm not sure, invited him. I think we felt awkward because, this is like work and you don't want everything to get weird, or that's what I'm thinking. Anyway, he came and you could tell, okay, he's finding this valuable. Anyway, so I kind of took that as a little bit of a permission to start having spiritual conversations with him, to start to have conversations of faith. And that eventually led to me taking him through the Alpha program. We would meet on Sunday nights, go have a bite to eat, and I would take him through the Alpha course. And I found out years later that this was really foundational for him returning to his faith, because I saw that he really, after that period, really got engaged in his faith, and now he's a key leader in his parish. And so what happened there? Well, here he saw in people that were relevant to him, like hardworking, smart professionals, like me, and he saw that faith was relevant to us. And so for him, that had him consider the relevance of faith in his life more closely. So what can you do? What are some of the things you can do to potentially create this situation where there may be people in your life who maybe potentially have an interest in faith when they find out that you have an interest in faith? Well, here's some of the bare minimums. Don't hide your faith. If you're engaged in your faith, active in your faith, which I said was one of the prerequisites, don't hide it. It's kind of hard to be engaged in your faith and for people not to eventually find out. If they're having conversations with you and they ask you, what'd you do on the weekend? You say, oh, we went to a movie and dinner, and then of course we went to church on Sunday morning. And when you do that, you've let the faith cat out of the bag. You've come out of the faith closet. And there may be one person, it may be the minority, who's going to maybe ask you about that. What I find the most common questions for those who are curious, almost invariably they'll ask, oh, okay, so were you raised in the Catholic Church? Is a very common question. And I'll say yes, but, and then I'll move into my testimony, because people who have an openness, whether they know it or not, are going to kind of wonder, hey, what's a smart, hardworking, otherwise together person engaged in their faith? Oh, it must be a cultural piece or an upbringing piece. And often, for many of us, as we know in our testimony, while our upbringing has definitely helped, for many of us, there's other things that have happened that have caused us to get engaged in our faith maybe a little later in life. So when people ask you about your faith, be ready to share your story. And even if it's, hey, I've always been engaged in my faith, I've always been kind of a steady Eddie or steady Edna, trucking along. But if you have a story where it was I wasn't super engaged or as engaged as maybe I should have been, this happened and now I'm even more engaged. It's really good to share that. And that's especially important when you're dealing with people who have questions and objections. As a matter of fact, now, when people raise objections about the faith, because most of the time I know it's an issue of perceived irrelevance, I actually go right to the testimony. I'll tell people, look, I'll be happy to answer any of your questions. If you don't mind, I'd love to tell you about why I'm so plugged in. So having your testimony is really great if you've already been kind of going down a road of trying to answer people's questions. There are so many other ways to kind of come out of the closet. I know when I first started off, I tried to keep I kept a little Bible, on my desk as a way. It was pretty small and it was off to the corner. You'd have to kind of come in at a very specific angle to see it, but it was a start. So start in some way. One of the principles here that we like to say is to sow broadly. If you were to make a list of all the people that you knew, it'd be a pretty long list. Like the vineyard, the sheepfold that the Lord has given you is probably pretty big. And so it's going to be key that just about everyone in your sphere of influence kind of knows that you're engaged in your faith. And just the practice of not hiding it, eventually the word's going to get out, and there may be someone who very surprisingly will be open, and they may be equally surprised that you're as engaged in your faith as you are. So you definitely need to sow broadly, because you don't know who it is. And if you're able to share your testimony, that it may also set the stage for you to share the kerygma, to be able to share the basic gospel message. But in this situation that I shared about my boss, that was enough. That was enough to get him started, for us to have spiritual conversations, and then for me to be able to take him through the Alpha course where I could actually present the kerygma. That was enough to get the ball started, just us being public about our faith in some way. But this does not catalyze or get the ball rolling for everyone. For some people, you just need more. And so, while being a witness, the first W, shows people that your faith is important to you, for some people, you really need to go to the next level. And they need to see how your faith is important to you, to see that your faith has added value. Now, that's obviously not the only reason why we engage in faith. Ultimately, it's because we're made to be in relationship with God, and we prepare now for our eternal destiny, and you need to eventually get to that. But one of the ways that can make faith relevant and answer the objections that it doesn't really pierce or have impact on our daily lives is how it solves problems. So a good friend of mine, who's the CEO of a marketing company, was in his early days when he was starting off the company. He really had a difficult time. And he found that he got a lot of wisdom from other Christian businessmen. He learned a lot about business principles, kind of biblically based principles, that he goes, yeah, like these principles make really, really good business sense. And that as part of that, he saw that these business people were really engaged in their faith. And so that tweaked something in him. That really showed the relevance of having a personal relationship with God, not just for business, or not just to do well in business, but just for life in general. So here's an example where wisdom can bridge from perceived irrelevance of faith to relevance when they see how biblical values and a relationship with God can add value to your life. Now, you may be saying, well, Chris, it's not like I don't necessarily have like all of this like amazing wisdom to share with people. Maybe not, but you have all kinds of life wisdom. You have wisdom about how God and your faith has helped you to navigate finances, relationships, your career, raising your kids, or just how to engage in faith directly. Like when I was talking to my boss about faith, he actually couldn't get over. He would regularly say, "Where did you learn all this?" And I'm like, most of the stuff I was sharing was just the basics of being a disciple, but he was so struck by the wisdom of the spiritual life. And I can tell you, it just came from having a relationship with God and trying to live it out. But there may be situations where people will raise things like a really easy, cool way is, let's say people are kind of worried about their finances. And you may say something as simple as, if this is true, we've had challenges in the past, my spouse and I, and we really found that our faith life helped us a lot, at least we just felt like, while we've done our best, we've left God with the rest. We've just found that our confidence in God, trusting in Him, while we're doing our part, He's going to take care of the rest. Or maybe in terms of looking for direction in your life. You just found that prayer would kind of, as you surrendered or asked God for His input, you just found that you were guided. So when you get into a relationship with people and have conversations, and as they grow in trust, they're going to bring up things, and chances are very good they're going to bring up an area where your faith has helped you. And that's an opportunity to share. And it's not because you're saying your faith has made you any better. That's not the spirit of it. As a matter of fact, the spirit is the opposite, is that your faith life and the wisdom has made you better than you were. And that's how you do that. And so these conversations also can set the stage to share the kerygma, to share the basic gospel message. And this happened with my barber. I went for a couple of haircuts, and I was able to, we had some initial kind of sort of light face conversations, and that kind of set the stage for me to be able to share the basic gospel message and invite him to say yes to it, and he did. Okay, so wisdom can be a really super valuable way to bridge from perceived irrelevance to relevance. When people see, oh my goodness, your faith life can really have a practical impact on your daily life. But wisdom isn't going to cut it. Your witness isn't going to be enough. Wisdom isn't going to be enough. It may set the stage, but it's not enough, just not enough to get someone's attention. They need something more. So you have to give them something more. In the power of the Holy Spirit, they need to have a very specific intervention of God in their lives. And that's effectively what happened with me. When I was in my last year of high school, the priest was he was very transparent with us. He said, look, I've been, teaching young people for years. And he says, I've been answering questions that no one's been asking. And I realized that if you're to have a vibrant faith life, you need to have an encounter with God directly. That you basically need to have a sign that not only is God real, but that He's close and that He's good. And so I really listened to this priest because I was in my last year of high school, and I was kind of thinking, not sure if I was going to be engaged in my faith anymore. And I thought I better listen in religion class one last time, so I did. And the priest gave us very kind of simple advice. He said, if you want to know that the Lord is close and that He's good, just invite Him into your life. And I was so remedial. I didn't even know what that meant. I eventually figured out, okay, I guess I just say a prayer. God, come into my life. And I remember thinking, okay, I'm going to do this thing about inviting God into my life whenever I think about it. And I wasn't sure, if I needed to, pray out loud or not. And I remember one time on the bus thinking, okay, yeah, invite the Lord into my life. Lord, come into my life. You know, I'm on the bus. What's that, buddy? How's your wife? After doing that for a while, I started to notice a change. Like something was different on the inside. I just found that I was more loving. And at first I just thought, okay, you know, I'm maturing here. I'm like 18, you know, far from being mature at all. But then I thought, maybe it's this praying I'm doing. And then, gosh, am I going to start thinking that I prayed and therefore something happened? I was nervous about that idea. But then the priest started to teach us, look, the Lord is a good father and he wants to take care of us. And while he does want to teach us how to, you know, live our lives and do our part, we can place our trust in him. So I started to do that. I started to trust the Lord with things. And I started to see him intervene in my life, and it was amazing. So, you know, when I think of us as evangelizers, I know sometimes we don't like to refer to ourselves that way. We're just like, oh, it feels like an awkward term. How about prayer coach? What if you saw yourself as just someone who coached people on how to pray very simply? So let's say, you know, you're trying to stir up some faith in them, and instead of fruitlessly trying to answer all their objections, just to say, hey, if you're ever curious, why don't you just get on your knees and ask God to reveal himself? And one of my colleagues who I work with, that's what happened to her. One of her friends said, hey, look, if you want to know this is true for yourself, I basically can't tell you. You just got to go and pray and invite God in. And she went and did it. And the Lord revealed his amazing love to her. And that was the turning point in her life. So being a prayer coach is a really cool way to go. There are other really powerful ways that people can experience a sign of the Lord's love and the Lord's goodness. And, you know, some people respond well to it, know what to do with it, and others don't. So one time, in the second case, one time I was at work, and there's a lady in our office who's kind of the office grandmother, and she was struggling with migraine headaches. And I said, I told her that I would pray for her. And she said to me, well, Chris, I don't believe in any of that stuff. And I said, that's okay, I do. And I realized, you know, I'd gone through a little bit of evangelization training myself, and I'd realized, oh, yeah, praying for people is good, but I'd recently learned praying with people is even better, that the Lord will really honor praying with someone. Now, this was super awkward because I was at the office. But anyway, I eventually worked up enough courage to pray with her. Let's call her Mary. Pray with Mary. And she was healed. She was healed of migraine headaches. And she actually didn't know what to do with it. She basically said, I've been healed and I don't believe it. And my contract kind of ended up shortly after that. So I don't know what happened with Mary. I hope that sparked a whole faith and a conversion, and we'll run into each other in heaven. But other times people will receive signs and they'll deal with it very well. Here's another great example. Another colleague of mine was sharing his faith with a young person and taking him through the gospel message. And after he presented the gospel to him, he said, hey, do you think now you'd be open to inviting Jesus to be at the center of your life? And the young man said, well, no way, I'd be too scared to do that. And my colleague had learned how to pray and ask for a prophetic word. We'd given him some formation there. And he just gets a single word. Maybe you've seen this story maybe in another video that I did. But he got just this one word, and he didn't know what it meant. But it really impacted this young man. He really felt seen, known, and loved with this one word. And as a result, he was able to say yes to the Lord. So this third category is called wonders and signs. Some people just need a wonder and need a sign to be able to say yes. And the Lord wants to use you to do it. So when you're evangelizing, your main challenge is going to be, the main barrier is going to be people just seeing it as irrelevant. And through this 3W formula, if you don't mind me calling it that, through being a witness, at least not hiding your faith, to sharing your wisdom about how your faith has helped you in daily life, and then finally stepping out in faith to pray with someone or to invite someone to pray, can be all you need to remove that roadblock to evangelization. Now, I did promise it at the end. I was going to give you my hack for answering objections, and I have found this in a fantastic tool. And I have a degree, a graduate degree in theology, and I found this tool gives better answers than the ones I could come up with. And it's chatgpt.com. Yes, artificial intelligence. I know it's a bit of a controversial thing, but a lot of times when I'm looking for really good answers or ways of wording answers to objections, it's my source. So anyway, let me know two things in the comments. Let me know any of your standard challenges in being a witness, sharing your wisdom, or moving in wonders and signs, or using AI to answer objections.